All right, so we're studying Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj's book or his interview called "I Am That," and we're on the section here where he's talking about desirelessness being the highest bliss. And I've told that story several times. I've got to go out and find some new stories here to share. But that highest bliss is your own. It's not a conditioned bliss. It's always present in you and always available to you. And it's a wonderful source of energy and enthusiasm. And it's very kind of the beloved to put it there. But it's silliness on our part because we continually forget to look there. It's like first of all, we don't really believe that we have a battery of bliss within ourselves. And then when we do hear that we have it, we have no idea where it is or how to access it because mind has blocked it out as white noise, oddly enough. And also, we've turned our attention away from our innards, from our inner world, our inner life, and placed it on the senses and the mind, the external world, time, space, causation, and all of those goodies. And so we're terribly distracted. And so this wonderful bliss is accessed when the mind is quiet, because then you're able to get yourself to pay attention to your inner reality, to the experience of being you, which is something we've all forgotten. And so at least a significant portion of the excitement in the early stages of our spiritual life is that wonderful discovery of having that temple within, that silent shrine where you can encounter the reality, the bottleneck of reality, which is you, and discover these things. And as the years go on, you start to learn at least as much from your practice as you do from the scriptures. And when you learn from your practice, it's always sort of a spontaneous manifestation of an interesting thing that pops in your mind that you had never really considered or never really known. But the clarity of it and the truth of it is self apparent when that happens. And so this is the joy of spiritual life, and it will happen. It happens for everybody. I mean, this is part of our nature. These aren't gifts as such. That's why the scriptures, not all the world's scriptures, but many of them, especially the dual scriptures, talk about the being an heir of this realization and not a beggar. So that in the dual world, you're not begging God for these things and for this realization. He's always making the point you're an heir. So in the Advaita world, that means it's a part of us. It's a part of the experience of being. It's the treasure chest inside that we uncover through awareness, right? We talk about this moment being the only real thing, and that actually you are this moment as the witness, and that this moment contains everything necessary for you. And the key to unlocking that information is awareness, inner awareness, becoming aware of your own awareness inside. And in that place of silence, the scripture says, well, I always mix mix these things together. I wasn't quite aware to the extent I did it until yesterday's class, when we had some really great folks there, some great Advaitists, and I kind of saw that I might mix things too much sometimes. So I'm going to start trying to discipline myself on that. All right, so the conversation that's going on here is about desirelessness and the highest bliss. And I'll back up a question, because the question, how is it done, isn't enough of a start. So the questioner had asked, I may not remember, but that does not disprove my being occasionally unconscious. Maharaj, why not turn away from the experience to the experiencer? Right? So we've talked about that, how there's two ways to live life. One is in a distracted manner, which means when you're walking down a busy street, you're looking in the shop windows and you're looking at everybody's outfits and you're thinking, oh, look at that, person's shoes. I want some like that. getting caught up and associating everything that you're seeing and interacting with you and being engaged in it. And that can be exhausting, after a long day shopping. You get back and your mind is kind of fluttered and distracted and you're exhausted, and you're carrying 14 trash bags of goodies that you bought. And then the other way, the way that he's talking about, is to ride down that street as if you're in a carriage, where you're comfortably seated within, you're content, and you're not being pulled out. You're not associating yourself with all of the different things that you're seeing. You're just observing it and letting it be what it is. And that actually increases energy. That actually increases that inner well of energy that you have in just that being, since you're being aware of the source and sitting silently in that infinite ocean of awareness, of bliss, of wisdom that is yourself. And so that's from the experiencer side, that's a wonderful gift of spiritual life. Of course, if you stay in that carriage a while, things kind of get bigger than the sense world, bigger than the external world for you, and ultimately we end in a samadhi, either a mahasamadhi or one of the other samadhis, the other experiences of isness, of our own being. So why not turn away from the experience to the experiencer and realize the full import of the only true statement that you can make? I am. So the question makes sense. How is it done? Indeed, how do we do this? Very interesting question, though, from Maharaj, or interesting answer. Maharaj says, there is no how here. Just keep in mind the feeling I am. Merge in it till your mind and feeling become one. By repeated attempts, you will stumble on the right balance of attention and affection, and your mind will be firmly established in the thought feeling, I am. Whatever you think, say, or do, this sense of immutable and affectionate being remains as the ever-present background of the mind. That affectionate being, that gentle sense of fondness for isness that exists within us. That's how the sages have come upon the idea that our nature, the nature of the reality that we're encountering, is in its essence Satchitananda, is in its essence of bliss, of wisdom, of existence. Of course, now those don't remain. But as an experiencer, as you're falling into reality, before you merge into that silent fullness or emptiness, depending on how you want to talk about it, you are the last three things that you could yell out about the experience is love, wisdom, existence itself, and then bloop, there's no one left to interview. you merge. Merge, I guess they use the word merge, so we'll use the word merge. It's problematic in some respects because there never were two. So what's merging with what? And that's why he's not saying that's why he's saying there is no how. Because there's actually, in that infuriating catch-22 of Advaita, there's nothing to be done. You are what you are already. Your realization already exists within you. It's not something that you achieve. It's not something that you compose or build. It is within you already. You have two seats in you to sit in. You can sit in the mind of the ever-changing, non-repeating reality and sit there and be tantalized with the play, as it were. Or you can sit in the other seat, which is mounted in that silent inner shrine, as it were, and see reality, encounter reality as it is. And that room, that seat, is where your enlightenment sits. To be established in that seat, as it were, this is all metaphorical, of course, to be established in that seat is your realization. You will know who you are when nothing is telling you. You'll have that direct experience And it will be an amazing experience for a while because it will be more real than anything you've encountered. You know, you'll understand when Vivekananda says things like, or when Thakur was asked by Vivekananda, have you seen God? And Ramakrishna answers, yes, I see him now, even more clearly than I see you. You know, and so what he's talking about there is not that not a matter of distance, but a matter of when an experience comes directly and bypasses senses, bypasses the instrument of senses, bypasses body, bypasses mind, and comes directly to the self, or is revealed directly to the self, there is a clarity and a reality to it. It's like watching a movie on one screen on an old VHS tape, you know, where the resolutions were so. When you look at them now, when you see what we used to watch as TV, you know, back in the 80s and earlier, when you look at those images and you compare them to the image on your iPad, it's like that. Information that comes in through the senses, comes in through the mind, has an unreal sense to it when you've seen or when you've had a vision or a direct experience of some kind, even a few seconds, not even seconds, a few microseconds of that. You suddenly become aware of how clunky this reality is and how obviously unreal it is. And so that's why Thakur had to come up with all of these tricks for staying in body consciousness, for staying in the duality, you know, because he saw the oneness, he knew the oneness, and he was constantly on the edge of letting go of duality completely. And, you know, from our perspective, merging into samadhi. And he did it several times a day, it seemed. And he would always apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. Oops. And so this is the wonder of what we're encountering here, and the reason for taking it, being quite inspired into really working on your practice, not making it just a thing that you do during your day, not just making it a few minute thing that you take care of in the mornings, but to really make it your life. To not let go of it, not keep it within the boundaries of just practice, but be observing all day long. Anytime you can think of it, you know, you're standing in line at the bank, go inside, become aware of your awareness. Look for the experiencer that's standing there bored in line, you know, waiting to, instead of, you know, looking and watching the teller, you know, count out the $3 million for the person in front of you and wondering about it. Go inside, take that time to touch your bliss, gather some energy, gather some reminder of what you are and what the real story is in what you're experiencing. And, you know, and you don't even really have to be good at it. I'm not talking about things that you do when you're realized. I'm not talking how to stand in line as a realized soul. It's be where you are, but do it, and you will find it at pretty much any level that you are, wherever you are on the path. You're going to touch something. You're going to touch something, even if it's just an impetus to get more interested. You know, like, oh wait, well, what's going on with that? You know, and so take these promises, see these descriptions of reality as promises, you know, as stamps of what really is and what's really going on and what is really happening, and be inspired by it to dig deeper and to see what is in there.
Maharaj, I have a comment.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this paragraph was really enlightening for me, because you know, I'd heard about many eons ago, about Advaita Bhakti, and saying that this was the highest form of Advaita, and I couldn't quite understand it. And you know, as you start on jnana, a lot of it is happening in the mind. Right. And you're witnessing, you're doing, you know, you're discriminating. But when Nisargadatta Maharaj talks about the affectionate being, and he talks about being the right balance of attention and affection. And to me, that affection, it really opened that pathway from the brain to the heart.
Yes.
And which becomes then, if when you do it with affection, it becomes bhakti, it becomes worship, right? And that's that where the jnana and the bhakti to me come together, and that Advaita bhakti becomes really, it plays itself out. And I kind of saw that when, if it's done just in the mind, it's just a mental thing, it doesn't touch your being. But when you have it with affection, it touches the being and becomes a worship of the self. So I just
Yes.
kind of wanted to share that,
No, that's
that's really
beautiful.
important.
And you're right. I'm very excited about that notion of Jnana Bhakti, as you know. And it's kind of why I've gotten rather sloppy in my mixing of Bhakti and Advaita together, which is if someone doesn't know my inner workings, it's probably fairly confusing. But that's the thing about Jnana, is that and Bhakti. Let's just take these two paths that seem to be so different, and yet they both lead to the same realization, that one without a second. And so both of them, it's not that they're two different truths, it's two different perspectives. Even in the common reality between a jnani and a bhakta, or a devotee, the common experience is that there is this me, this body mind, this limited self, and then there's this other, seeming other. I'm not saying the other exists or doesn't exist. It's just this seeming other. And the only difference really between the two paths is that the bhakti gets interested in this other, gives it a name, gives it a character, gives it a set of attributes, as they may be, either the attributes of their associated avatar, or if they're trying to worship the formless, that'll still have attributes, but it won't be attributes of form. It'll be attributes of nature, that it's loving, that it's kind, that it's compassionate, these kinds of things. Whereas the Jnani leaves it unnamed, leaves it as the absolute unchanging, and that Buddha nature, becomes sort of a reference, or can be sort of a reference to some of the qualities that the bhakti associates with the whole. And so when because occasionally, even Sri Nisargadatta in here, we've run into at least two occasions where he says the word God as part of his discussion of the reality. And so really, in that sense, God is just kind of the marker for this unknown other that we've placed outside of ourselves, the part of us that we have to absorb, that we have to come to know as being ourself. Sri Nisargadatta says that there is no outside, there is no external world. If there's a unity as the realization, there can't be an outside world and an inside world. And so what he says is that those things that you know fully, you place in your inner world. Those things that you don't know at all or only partially know, you place in your external world. And so really it's a matter of knowledge at that. And that's the Jnani's point, that it's a matter of knowledge before that external world becomes internal world, before you realize that that is the container of all. And that they're in one essence, in one sense, of course, just mythological or metaphorical, is all is interior. So, but if all is interior, why call it interior? So there's no more distinction. There's no more two. But this unity of things, it's this unity of the experience, this one without a second. We've talked in the past some, and it's a big area of experimentation for me. But this duality happens in you first, in a very real way. When you identify with your body and mind, there's a dual self inside all the time. The self, the listener and the thinker, are the watcher of the mind and the content of the mind, the watcher of the body and the body. And that duality, that broken second in there, is there. There's your sense of higher self, your conscious, your conscience, as which is really the voice of the real in you, is there. And then there's the broken you, the deluded you, the impure you, that where you've identified with all of these attributes, and you see yourself separate from that, the voice of the real inside. And so you argue with it. you justify yourself with it. Oh, it's not that bad. I can do this. When you catch yourself doing that, like if you're reaching for that ninth piece of cake and something, and you're like, oh, this isn't that bad. There's no problem with this. Stop at that point and say, who am I talking to? who's talking to who in here? Because it's a duality that we set up with inside that causes our weakness. It's like we argue with ourselves. We know we shouldn't have 9 pieces of cake. Nobody has to tell us that. It's never an okay thing, no matter what. And yet you'll break into another voice. You'll identify with the voice of the senses in the mind, because that will only present to you over and over and over and over again how delicious that big nub of icing is going to be when you taste it. And so you identify with that little subroutine of the senses in the mind that's saying, oh, but we want that. We look at that big rose on there. I want that. And your real self, whom you also identify with, in a sense, maybe not in that moment as strongly, they're going to argue with each other. If that argument happens, you're going to lose, because the only point of that argument is for it to make it okay for you to lose. This is what you have to watch the mind for. This is why we turn our awareness inward, to see the patterns and quite frankly, the absurdity of the way the mind works and how we fall into it. When you're looking at that 9th piece of cake, if there's something in you that needs to argue with the fact you shouldn't eat it, watch that process. Watch the magic that's happening. That's where the play happens. The play doesn't happen out here. The play happens in there. And so watch as the character develops. The fat, plumpy guy that wants to eat another piece of cake, and the skinny, crotchety guy that's never in a good mood that's telling you not to. Look at them and pay attention to how they formed. They form because of identity. You identify with the senses. You reach out and you take that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, the one that looks beautiful, like it would be good for food, something you should eat. You're creating a character or a voice out of that desire and identifying with it, which gives it sentience. That's why it can argue. It can't argue on its own. It's just it's a thought that came from emptiness and is going back to emptiness. But as your interest, your identity in it, gives it a voice, gives it a sentience, and then it argues with the only sentience, the only real sentience in the body, which is the self. And you're going to sometimes listen to it, which means that you are accepting and identifying with, inviting ignorance into your identity of who you are. And so that's why the sages say that this is a matter of ignorance. You are identifying with the unreal characters of your mind that you've created yourself by identifying with these little whirlwinds of sense information that come forward. And so duality isn't a matter of seeing an inside and outside. It's a matter of you seeing yourself as more than one, and having these thought conversations and these arguments and these divisive ongoings in the mind. And, like all of the vices, if it gets bad enough, you break into 2 people. You become, become schizophrenic, bipolar. You break the mind, because you've identified so fully with several different opposing ideas of self and given them all sentience. And then you believe in their existence. You believe, and then you become unaware that you even created them, and they just live there, as these voices in your mind. So this is the importance of going inward, putting that awareness inward on the inside, putting awareness on the awareness first, and in that awareness of awareness, the mind betrays itself. You see these things happen because you're aware. They're not happening under the curtain anymore. They're in front of you. And as you watch them happen, it's amazing how absurd our ignorance is, how absurd our Maya is, our ego. And that's where you're hoping to get. In that awareness, when it begins to see these things in and of themselves become ashamed, as it were, in the light of awareness, and diminish. So awareness is what brings us there. And awareness is what heals our inner duality, which causes our assumed external duality, our separateness, because mind is everything. There is nothing but mind. And so if there's only one person in you, be that person. That's the whole of religion. Be the only person that actually exists, that actually exists within you. All right? So there is no how. Just keep in mind the feeling I am. That's being aware of awareness. Merge in it till your mind and feeling become one, right? Until the different components of mind, the different characters of mind that are voicing thoughts become one. By repeated attempts, you will stumble on the right balance of attention and affection, and your mind will be firmly established in the thought feeling, I am. That I am, for the Jnani, is just that. But for the person of devotion, somebody in a dual religion, that I am is quite frankly God for them. So you see, we're talking about the same thing, just in different ways. We're not going to name the I am and become very interested in it. We're going to just take that as the reality and know that it's who we are and try and work on getting rid of all of the other characters inside until we're firmly the I am without distraction from that. Whatever you think, say, or do, this sense of immutable and affectionate being remains as the ever-present background of the mind. And as a matter of fact, I mean, that is what it is right now. Even though we haven't put our awareness there, it's important to know that this immutable, affectionate being remains ever present in the background of the mind. It's there now. It's not that you don't have to build it. You don't have to. Your realization, the sages say, is the only cause with no effect. Means that the things that you do are not what is creating your imagined experience of realization that you've placed in some future thing. That realization is ready to go. It's all fully packed and labeled and postage stamped. It's ready to go inside you right now. You're just running around the house looking for it. That's all. And when you get tired of running around the house and getting distracted by all the things in the different rooms, you'll find it. You'll realize it was in your back pocket, as it were, in your backpack. Questioner, he says, and you call it liberation? Maharaj, I love this. I call it normal. What is wrong with being, knowing, and acting effortlessly and happily? Why consider it so unusual as to expect the immediate destruction of the body? What is wrong with the body that it should die? Correct your attitude to your body and leave it alone. Don't pamper, don't torture. Just keep it going, most of the time below the threshold of conscious attention. Most of the time, below the level of conscious attention. So have these things switch places. put your body and all of the pampering and torturing that you do to it in a day, have that become secondary instead of the thought of I am, instead of the inner attention. Have that become your primary thoughts during the day instead of vice versa. And this knowing, he says, he calls it normal because it is normal. A realized soul, unfortunately to us, because it seems so unusual, we say that's the unusual, or that's not the normal thing. But the realized soul is just being what a human is. just being what you are. That's it. No calculations in the mind. When he says here, what's wrong with being, knowing, and acting effortlessly? Effortlessly means it's not calculated and preconditioned inside. You're not sitting there. Uh, I heard this wonderful talk on paying attention one time, on listening, on NPR, and one of the things the person said is that she pointed out that we are trained as people in a conversation only to listen to the other person long enough to formulate our own response. And once we've got our response ready to go for what they said, we just sit there and wait for them to get finished. Like, yeah. Okay, now here comment. Now here's what I have to say. And they only hear enough of it to formulate their response. And that's why our conversations, our discussions are so fruitless, because we're all just reinforcing our own ideas by only hearing enough to formulate what we think and then responding to it. And she was saying, she went on to talk about some of the principles of active listening. Instead of thinking about what your response is to that person, listen to what they're saying and then repeat it back to them to see if you understood it properly. And if you didn't, then they'll correct that. And it goes back and it goes deeper. And if you read a little blurb online about active listening and then try it with your husband or one of your friends today, try those principles, you will find if you actively listen, if you do the principles of active listening, your conversation will go from Twitter style to encyclopedia style. Things go deep very quickly when you mirror somebody, respond back with what they told you to make sure you understand them. That goes deep very quickly, and you'll get to know people so much better. And in that is how we grow and how we learn. So in this sense of living like that, don't get caught up in your own little story in the mind and just see enough of reality to kind of, get the ice cream out of the machine fast enough. Pay attention, look deeply inside at your experience of being and allow a natural response, not a calculated response. Allow your nature to respond as it does, not going up here, angling and drawing out plans and looking for results. It's a matter of being. It's a matter of mindfulness. It's a matter of being present and keeping it very simple. The questioner says, but the memory of my wonderful experiences haunt me. I want them back, which is exactly why we remember them, right? We create a fake past or an imagined past. We create it just so that we have a bag to put our attachments. That's all the past is. That's the only reason we keep it around. So this guy's very insightful in this question. The memory of my wonderful experiences haunt me because I've created this big imaginary bag in my mind in which I've placed all of my attachments, and now I can't see past it at the moment. I can't see the moment because I've got this, each of your attachments is a lens in your glasses. We're all looking through glasses like 4.5 feet thick of saved experiences, trying to see God. You ever seen Mr. Magoo? That's how we're running around the world. It's purely grace that we haven't fallen off the skyscraper. That's probably a lost reference on most people, but Mr. Magoo was this blind character, an old man who had big thick glasses on, and he couldn't see at all. But he didn't know he couldn't see. He just lived life as if he could see. And as he's walking through the whole scene of the cartoon, things are magically happening that keep him safe. Like he walks off the edge of a skyscraper, but just at that time, the crane is lifting up an I-beam. And so he just walks right out onto the I-beam, and the crane swings around and the I-beam gets set down, and he just continues off. And so he should have died from blindness. But the whole cartoon is really the grace of God in the sense of just continually making sure that reality supports his idea that he can see, even though he's blind as a bat. And tell me that that's not sort of what goes on for us, that we've got these huge attachments. We're so ignorant of most of what's going on inside and outside even. And yet somehow we just kind of stumble along this life, and things mostly work. And I just think of us as this Mr. Magoo. So you've got this big bag of your attachments for foreseeing the moment that is not helping you. And Maharaj says, well, that's because you want them back, you cannot have them. You know, if you want them back, you can't have them. Now, why would he say that? Does that mean there's somebody out there preventing you from having what you want? Not at all. There's a little hidden tumbler in the lock that he's talking about right there. He says, if you want them back, you cannot have them. If you want them back, you assume that you don't have them, right? If you want them back, to want something, you have to assume you don't have it, or you don't have what you think you're going to get from it. And if you assume that you don't have it, in the reality, there's nowhere else to get it. You know, there's nowhere else to get it. The external world is a projection of yourself. If you've placed something in yourself somewhere where you can't have it, or you assume that you don't have it, and you go outside to try and find it, you're not going to get it. This is part of the frustrating nature of ignorance in this world, where we run around wondering, why can't I be happy? Why can't I be happy? I've tried everything. I've gone everywhere. I've spent millions on therapy. I can't be happy. And Nisargadatta is saying this sentence here is the same as when he says, do you not know it is your search for happiness that prevents you from being happy? Because you're making a wrong assumption to begin with. You're making the assumption that your happiness lies out there in something. And so you've done that with all of the things that you want to have back. You've assumed that something in yourself lies in those things. And those things, when you go get them, those things that you think you want, are not going to give you what you're looking for, because they never contained them. You placed yourself in them, packaged them, or you thought you did. But all they took was your sentience. All they took was your existence, and now they've become something separate from you that is infecting you with unhappiness, with discontent, with a sense of lack and not fullness. Because you want them back, you cannot have them. Yes.
Yeah, so I just have a quick comment on that. I might have quoted this before because I think of it a lot. It's from Rumi, the Sufi mystic.
Yes.
And he said, I knocked on the door of happiness. It opened, and I realized I was knocking from within.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so this is faith. Okay, faith. Well, here I am mixing things up again, but in the sense, this is faith. To look at this bag of memories that contain things that you want to have back. Look at them and assume you have them. Assume that nothing in that bag has left you, or is somewhere else, or is gone. It's hard to imagine, but imagine it. And that to the degree that you can do that, to that degree you have them. To that degree you don't need them. You don't need to keep them in this separate bag of yourself. He says this state of craving blocks all deeper experience. It's a surface experience. It floats at the top of the mind. This craving it has to float at the top of the mind because it's at the level of the senses. The senses are the source of craving. That experience of pleasure, and then you grab that experience of pleasure and you put it in your big bag of past, and then it just keeps playing over and over and over again, that little piece of pleasure, which was actually a part of a whole wave that was pleasure and misery, pleasure and suffering. But the mind, when you store the pleasure, just keeps the pleasure part, and you forget that every wave has both the height and the lull, the peak and the lull. The peak is the pleasure, the lull is the price of that pleasure. And that price of that pleasure you become aware of it when the pleasure is finished, when it's done, when that ninth piece of cake is gone and there's no more cake. That's the suffering. Where are you going to get your 10th piece of cake from now? And so every pleasure has its suffering associated with it. And so when your mind is playing back a repeat loop of how wonderful your vice was the last time you did it, pause that loop, put your awareness on it and say, well, let's broaden the boundaries of that memory a bit, and let's remember the suffering as well as the pleasure that it caused me. And let's collapse those two out. And what am I left with? I'm left with what I am. No peak, no lull, you know. And that I am, it might seem like a 0 point neutral, but that's his whole point in that previous verse of telling you to keep your awareness on this part of you that has an affectionate tendency toward everything, you know, a kind, just a general sense of affection for all. Live there in that space and feel the beauty of that. Feel the delight of that. Because you want them back, you can't have them. The state of craving for anything blocks all deeper experience. Nothing of value can happen to a mind which knows exactly what it wants, because it is caught. A mind that knows exactly what it wants means that it has exactly identified something that it has moved out of itself and put it into the symbol. Now, of course, it can't do that. So all it's done is moved its idea of the thing that remains within him. He's removed the idea of that thing and placed it in the reflection, placed it in the mind symbol for that thing, right? And if he knows exactly what he wants, that means he's fully convinced that it exists, that the thing that still remains here, the idea of it that he's placed there, he mistakes for the real and is firmly convinced that is real. I know exactly what I want. That means he has firmly convinced himself that that it wasn't an idea of the thing that he put out there, but that is the thing itself, right? And so this is a very important teaching, because all of the objects that we desire are merely ideas of things that we actually are in our nature, but that we have placed them elsewhere. You know, I can go back to my story of pizza for that if I need to. You know, where you smell pizza, and instead of just letting that be part of a perfect day, you take the idea of pizza and you place it in an object, which actually looks like a slice of pizza there. You put the idea of satisfaction, you now put it outside of yourself, but you were satisfied already before you smelled the pizza. And so see what you've done. That smell of pizza activated that memory of pleasure, which you had placed in a piece of pizza. And now you believe that you need that pizza for the beauty of the moment, forgetting that just 2 seconds ago, the moment was perfect already, that you were enjoying the day. And so when you feel a desire arise, do that exact process. Think, gosh, have I been happy without that thing before? Have I been content before this desire arose? Then what is the point of being discontent now just because a desire, a thought, a series of thoughts, a memory arises in my mind? Why should I change my contentment for a memory? And this is the process of being aware of awareness. These things become apparent to you when you begin going inside and viewing from the silent space the active mind. It betrays all of this. And he's quite adamant here. You see the depth of this problem. He says, nothing of value can happen to a mind which knows exactly what it wants. For nothing the mind can visualize and want is of much value, because it's just a thought. It's just a thought. This is one of the fastest ways to gain that sense of equanimity, is to realize that all these various feelings, all of these sense inputs, all of these memories, all of these desires, all of these plans, all of these longings, all of them are the same thing. They're all just a thought about something. And that something is the self, the root and source of all. Right? And so that's why Thakur says, as long as a man sees objects, he's deluded. You've turned your thought into objects, or began looking at your thoughts as objects, and then sharing your reality with them. So don't do this. That's the fundamental teaching. Stop it. For nothing the mind can visualize and want is of much value. Questioner: then what is worth wanting? Maharaj: want the best, the highest happiness, the greatest freedom. Desirelessness is the highest bliss. Right? So want that which doesn't go away. All the avatars, we'll bring the avatars into this conversation because I like illegal things. We'll talk about avatars in our Advaita class. But, it is interesting that when Jesus goes to the woman at the well and he tells her, if you had asked, I could have given you the water which would have cured your thirst forever. And then Sri Ramakrishna tells the woman who has an alcoholic husband, and he tells her, well, invite him to come here. And she says, he wouldn't come here. He says, tell him if he comes here, I'll give him a drink that will give him an intoxication. He'll never need another drink again. And so, of course, later that happens. Later, he gets over his alcoholism. He comes to see Thakur. Anyway, what he's saying there is exactly what our teacher here, what Nisargadatta is telling us. Understand that within you have the ocean of bliss. You have the thing within you that has given value to all of your thoughts, because all of your thoughts are only symbols of things that already exist within you, that are already yours. You've just been hypnotized by your duality of giving them sentience and existence separate and apart from you, even though they were just thoughts, nothing more. Want the best, the highest happiness, the greatest freedom. Desirelessness is the highest bliss. Questioner: freedom from desire is not the freedom I want. I want the freedom to fully fulfill my longings. This is marvelous, because this, it sounds stupid when it's written out like that. You look at that and you're like, what a fool. Look at him. We're doing this even at this very moment. We're doing this. I remember one day, and tell a little weird story here. I was showering. It was early in the morning, and I was kind of, as I was washing, my hair, I just was paying attention to everything that I was soaping and touching, and using that to say, okay, that's not me. Right? Okay, so that's not me. And so then I washed my face. That's not me. This is not me. So I could identify it by touch. And I was just kind of doing that. This is not me. Get that in my mind and my neck. This is not me. And I just continued the whole shower of this is not me. And I kept backing up in my mind, withdrawing from these different spaces that of touch that I had identified as I was bathing. Sorry to drag you there. And when I got out of the shower, I really felt a wonderful bliss and a freedom there. And the first thought, when I realized that I was free, my first thought was, oh, what should I do? What should I do? And I realized at that point that you can't have freedom and desire, because desire is something you have placed out of yourself that you're going to have to serve to get your satisfaction. So in this world, if you can't be happy from within, if you can't be content as you are, your highest aspiration is slavery. Because whatever it is that you think you need to get from the outside, you're going to have to do service to it to get it. Whatever it is. And so as long as you think that anything outside is going to give you what you're looking for, this is the curse of the Garden of Eden, by the way. As long as you think anything outside of yourself is going to give you what you need to have, you are cursed to work the rest of your life to fulfill your desires, just like you're doing. All right? You could probably, you go out constantly, working all day long, every day, 10, 12, 14 hours, come home exhausted. And why did you do it? I got to pay for my car. I got to pay for my vacation. I got to pay for my husband. I got to pay for my wife. I've got to pay for this big house. I've got to pay for my everything. All of your desires are what are tormenting you. They are what has made your life so busy and so exhausting and so distracting and so crazy. When if you had just kept it simple, if you had just had the things that you needed, if you hadn't decided to triple the size of your house and buy 4 more cars to smash in the garage, if you hadn't decided just to keep upgrading, this year you're going to on some Congo safari instead of to the local beach to stay in a cabin. These are the reasons that you're stressed out. These are the reasons that you're exhausted. You've let your desires make you a slave in the name of you thinking of freedom. My freedom is to do what I want. That's actually the American ideal of freedom. I can do what I want. It's a free country. No, freedom is not needing to do anything. Freedom is being content as you are and not having to run after anything. Freedom does not lie in desire and does not have desire as a component of freedom. To be free is to be without desire. To be without desire is to be content and blissful, free of condition and circumstance.
Swami.
Yes.
One more quick comment. It's interesting you brought up in this country, because I think we can blame Thomas Jefferson, right? In our founding document, he said we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So now we're all running around looking for all our pleasures and all our longings.
Yes.
So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't mean blame him in a real sense, because he obviously
I hear
was.
you, but you're absolutely right in that kind of thinking, and you can play with that thinking, follow it through to a little bit. And you see that's where all our struggles are, because our pursuit of what we believe will make us happy is what creates our values and what creates all of our bickering in politics. Wait a minute, if you give them that, I can't get this. But it's all projection. It's nothing there. Even all of those values that we hold and fight over, those are just thoughts as well. These are all just thoughts, ideas that we fill our life and world with, but we give them reality. We share our reality with them. Which interestingly, well, that's a dual thought too. I won't do that. So he says, freedom from desire is not the freedom I want. I want the freedom to fulfill my longings. I want the freedom to serve my master. So he says, Maharaj, you are free to fulfill your longings. As a matter of fact, you are doing nothing else. Questioner, I try, but there are obstacles which leave me frustrated. Maharaj will overcome them. Questioner, I cannot. I'm too weak. Maharaj, what makes you weak? What is weakness? Others fulfill their desires. Why don't you? Questioner, I must be lacking the energy. Maharaj, what happened to your energy? Where did it go? Did you not scatter it over so many contradictory desires and pursuits? You don't have an infinite supply of energy. Why not? because your aims are small and low. They do not call for more. Only God's energy is infinite. Okay. Maharaj did that. I didn't do that. He put God in his Advaita lecture. Your aims are small and low. They do not call for more. Only God's energy is infinite because he wants nothing for himself. Be like him, and all your desires will be fulfilled. The higher your aims and the vaster your desires, the more energy you will have for their fulfillment. Desire the good of all, and the universe will work with you. But if you want your own pleasure, you must earn it the hard way. What a wonderful statement. If you want the good of all, the whole universe will conspire to your success. But if you just want what's best for you, then you have to work alone. And you'll be exhausted. And this makes sense. You know, I read in, well, I think it was I don't know where I read it actually, but it was the story of the early disciples, how much energy they had. You know, they were working around the clock with service and the monastery and writing and teaching and putting out publications. And, you know, Shardananda would sleep, you know, for less than an hour a night, it says, under the desk in his office, and carried on like that. You know, I'm complaining because I got less than 7 last night. Maharaj was doing all of these things. Why? Because he was doing all these things for others, all of these things for the benefit of the world. And he had an infinite amount of energy for that. You know, he was surviving on less than an hour of sleep a night. And so this is demonstrated in some of the stories of the scriptures of many traditions, not just one that would know this story. So it's a beautiful idea here that really is, it's one to test. It's one to test. So get rid of your aims that are small and low, that are selfish and benefit a single person, and start dreaming for the benefit of all. You know, start working for the betterment of the whole, and you'll have an infinite amount of energy behind you. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's the best sentence that I didn't read there. He says, desire the good of all, and the universe will work with you. But if you want your own pleasure, you must earn it the hard way. Before desiring, deserve. Before you want it, be worthy of it. Yeah. An interesting idea. Questioner, I'm engaged in the study of, it's 10:03. This starts a new thought. So let's stop here and just